Good night.
Hey, hey, meet the royals. They're nothing like you and me. Loaded with power and money, and chased by the paparazzi.
From private affair to public eye, Charles and Camilla on Meet the Royals. Next on A&E.
Here they come, walking down the street. They get the funniest looks from everyone they meet. Hey, hey, meet the royals. They're nothing like you and me. Loaded with power and money, and chased by the paparazzi. Hey, hey, meet the royals. Hey, hey, meet the royals.
Hey, hey, Davy Jones here for Meet the Royals. Age before beauty, they say. That's practically a motto for Prince Charles. Here he was, married to one of the most beautiful women in the world, Princess Di, and he's under the sheets with her, Camilla Parker Bowles, or, as Diana fondly called her, the Rottweiler. Grrr. Welcome to Meet the Royals, where we take you beyond Buckingham Palace to experience life with royalty. The perks, the protocol, and the hanky-panky. You see, having a mistress is practically par for the course when you're a prince. The real question about Camilla is, why didn't Charles just marry her in the first place?
Camilla's opening gambit was, my great-grandmother and your great-great-grandfather were lovers, so how about it?
Stay tuned as we get cozy. Charles and Camilla on Meet the Royals.
It's all in the genes. Camilla Shand was born to be the mistress to a prince. After all, she was just following family tradition.
Camilla comes from a very racy background. Her great-grandmother was mistress of the Prince of Wales at the beginning of the 20th century, and her great-aunt Violet was a famous lesbian who had a runaway affair with one of Britain's great writers, Vita Sackville-West.
Kings have always had mistresses. I think that a mistress to a king was seen as a very honourable role indeed, and I suppose it still is in a way. If a marriage stops working, normally in royal circles you simply cannot walk away from a marriage, so you just take a mistress. Historically, that's what's always happened. Even if a marriage is working, you take a mistress.
Born in 1947, Camilla had the perfect pedigree for being paramour to a prince. Mom was the daughter of a lord. Dad was master of the local fox hunt.
A royal mistress must come from a certain social position. You'll never find a Prince of Wales having an affair with a waitress or a chambermaid. Camilla's background was aristocratic. She came from a long line of people who were associated with the royal family, and so therefore she was socially acceptable.
And how does a budding member of the British upper crust spend their childhood? Doing what the royals do. Horse riding, shooting, and fox hunting, of course.
I think really it was a fairly idyllic childhood in a sense that the war was over, rationing was over. I think Britain was beginning to feel prosperous again. And certainly I think it was probably a wonderful time to be in the country.
Life wasn't quite so wonderful for Camilla's future Prince Charming. Charles was being raised to be king, but he was really just a lost and lonely boy looking for love in the chilly confines of the House of Windsor.
Charles grew up without the kind of tactile love and without the kind of reassurance that he was loved. Charles worshipped his father and worshipped his mother and really craved their approval. And their approval really was not demonstrative enough. So I think he grew up feeling that he was not up to much, with low self-esteem.
Charles dutifully broke out the royal wave when he was shipped to a strict school in Scotland named Gordonston. Harsh and Spartan, in many ways it was the school of hard knocks for the young prince.
Well, Charles had a very hard time at school because he was very shy, he was very introverted, he wasn't a very attractive child, and the other boys were actually really cruel to him, as only little boys can be. They used to stick his head in the mud and hold it there. They used to put his head down the loo. They used to do just terrible things to him.
Prince Charles pulled up his knee socks and began to battle his way through Gordonston. Back Back in London, Camilla headed off to a posh school in the city where the it girls of her class were primed for marriage. It was called Queensgate.
Queensgate? Well, that sounds like a perfect portal to a prince.
Located just blocks from Harrods, the school taught girls about style, and Camilla needed more help than most in that department.
Camilla was always called Miller by her friends. She dressed rather conservatively, but then everybody did at Queensgate except for me when I look back. Sort of twin sets, tweedy skirts and stuff like that. Headscarves, darling. Everybody wore headscarves. Bar moi.
It was the dawn of the swinging 60s, and London was the place where it was all happening. But the Tweedy set was stuck in picnic mode. Camilla, now 17, was less concerned with revolution than finding the right debutante gown. Her parents presented her to society, and hopefully to a Prince Charming. The season was on.
Camilla was full of fun. You know that expression, life and soul of the party. She would stick out in the crowd. You know, people who were debutantes anyway, but there were young men who were on the list, and there were suitable young men who would be invited.
For a Deb on the make, Charles was the guy to grab.
Parents of the girls at school were quite anxious that they might get into Prince Charles's circle. But the girls didn't really talk about it. It was just normal life. I think probably the mothers were anxious that the girls got to meet him.
Camilla had other plans. She had her eyes set on the dreamiest guy in the crowd, Andrew Parker Bowles.
He was this swashbuckling cavalry officer figure, brave, dashing, the most handsome man in London, and also a great lover.
How does he know that?
Camilla was smitten. She and Andrew soon launched a torrid affair.
Wait, where's the prince?
After escaping hellish Gordonston, Charles entered university. He was the first Prince of Wales to get a degree. He also joined the Navy, began a lifetime of royal duties, and squeezed in some horseplay. The polo-playing prince was turning into a royal heartthrob.
Charles was playing a great deal of polo in those days, a very swashbuckling figure, extremely handsome, attracting all sorts of upper-crust ladies with knotted headscarves under their chins.
Bar moi.
All looking at this very sexy figure. Andrew Parker Bowles was also playing polo at that time and often played either with or against Prince Charles. And he used to bring his girlfriend, Camilla Shand, along. And before too long, the two people met and their eyes locked, and that was it.
Camilla had hooked the big fish. Her boyfriend, Andrew, was off shagging all of London, including Charles's sister, Anne. Now, Camilla could top him by betting the prince.
It's said that Camilla's opening gambit was, my great-grandmother and your great-great-grandfather were lovers, so how about it? Who could resist such an invitation?
Charles fell madly, head over heels in love. But for Camilla, it was just a summer fling.
But don't doubt for a minute, Camilla was not in love with the Prince of Wales. She was head over heels in love, in lust, with Andrew Parker Bowles.
Camilla, in those days, was on a 7-year mission to marry the man of her dreams, and the man of her dreams was Andrew Parker Bowles.
Poor Charles. He had found the woman of his dreams, but he couldn't win her. Worse, his confidant, Uncle Dickie, a.k.a. Lord Mountbatten, thought Camilla was an excellent choice for a mistress, but not exactly wife material. Too common and too randy. Mountbatten told Charles it was time to play the field, put a few more notches on the bedpost. And the prince obediently followed orders.
Mountbatten, who was a great spiritual advisor, friend, etc., encouraged him to sow some wild oats, was the phrase he used, and not to rush into marriage.
At the time when Charles and Camilla actually met, he was still young, wet behind the ears, inexperienced with women. He'd probably had sex with 2 women. He knew nothing about women.
Mountbatten provided a kind of safe sanctuary for him, and he did take girls down to Broadlands. And Mountbatten did advise him and, you know, suggest who was good and who was not.
A bevy of upper-crust babes was presented to Charles. Titled ladies and heiresses like Lady Sarah Spencer, Sabrina Guinness, Davina Sheffield, and Lady Jane Wellesley. But could he persuade any of them to be his princess?
He'd had a succession of terrific girlfriends, a number of whom didn't actually want to be his wife because of all the problems that go with it. I remember Jane Wellesley, Lady Jane, daughter of the Duke of Wellington. I mean, she really couldn't face becoming his wife because of everything that went alongside it.
In his heart of hearts, Prince Charles seemed to be holding out for Camilla. But while he was away at sea came crushing news. Camilla was no longer available. She had married Andrew Parker Bowles.
Tomorrow on A&E. At 8, Barbara Stanwyck on biography. And at 9, a trail of debt and a trace of lipstick link a con man to murder on Cold Case Files. Then at 10, a community loses faith when their rabbi does the unthinkable. Cherry Hill, New Jersey on City Confidential. It all begins tomorrow at 8 on A&E.
This program is brought to you in part by Saab.
There's a state where there's fun around every corner, where all cars are turbocharged, and there's a direct link between the right foot and a smile. Maybe that's why people who test drive.
Today on Palace P's and Q's, a question that I'm sure has been keeping you up at night. What if you get a present from Prince Charles? Say, a piece of jewelry, and it's just a complete dog, a disaster. Do you have to wear it? Etiquette Queen Victoria Mather has the answer.
Oh, I think you should, don't you? It might look like a bird dropping on your, if it was a brooch on your lapel. You should definitely wear it. And I think it would be a bit crass to take it back to the shop and trade it in. I don't think you should do that. Anyway, then, think it's a huge historical interest for your family, isn't it? Prince Charles gave me that. Actually, I know that the brooches that Prince Charles does give are absolutely beautiful. They're little, he only gives them to very special friends, and they're little brooches of the Prince of Wales's feathers.
Oh, really?
Yes, and they are worn with terrific pride.
Of course, if you're Camilla, perhaps you better keep your eye on just who's wearing those brooches, eh? Or not. Could be. As the case may be.
Prince Charles was despondent when he found out Camilla had married his old polo chum, Andrew Parker Bowles. But when he returned to terra firma, he found a way to cheer up quickly, thanks to a most unusual friend.
Luis Baswalda, yes, wonderful person, a real smoothie, Argentinian polo player, extraordinarily became Prince Charles's patron. He was captain of his polo team. Enormous fun. Used to procure women, girlfriends for Prince Charles. A hell of a character. The sort of person with whom the Prince of Wales should have had nothing to do at all.
The girls I fixed him up with were my friends. They were a bit wild. Yes, the country people, they were boring. The people he liked were boring. He was sheepish, bashful, timid. He was charming, I mean, nice, but insecure. You know, he'd look at me in some sort of awe, admiration. Yeah, everything I did, he wanted to copy.
In that stage, that was the sort of action man, parachuting playboy prince. Occasionally photographed coming out of the Australian surf with a bikini-clad model, but that had usually been sprung on him by the press, much to his displeasure.
Doesn't look like he's too upset. In fact, Charles seemed to enjoy the ladies. In Montreal, a sexy young subject caught his eye. Janet Jenkins met the prince at the British Embassy.
Nice of you to have to see Montreal. And he said, and I said, it's a very beautiful city. And he said, well, if you'll show it to me, I will. So I said, oh, I'd love to. And it was very off the cuff. I mean, I really didn't expect him to call me and ask me to actually show him the city. It's very exciting. When he came back to my apartment on another occasion in Montreal, we had policemen on the roof, on the fire escape, I'm literally sitting on a seat outside the door of my house. And he had a panic button that was on the table, the night table. Which is very funny.
The night table? What is this naughty woman telling us?
Our relationship really was mostly letters and telephone calls for a long period of time.
Prince Charles wrote gushing words to Janet, his girlfriend. It was marvelous to hear your voice again the other day from the Ritz, but desperate being unable to see you. But even in the midst of romance, Charles felt the pressure to get properly hitched. I can see that I shall just have to get married as soon as possible, and then all these people might relax a little.
He said, you know, the woman that I marry, he said, will have to really have no past, will have to really be able to deal with all the pressures. He said, unless she's born to this, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult for her to give up all that sense of personal identity, basically, and any freedom.
They dated under the radar until a photographer snapped them fishing in Scotland. Obviously not Queen material. Remember the night table? The romance ended. He was 28 and lonely. Thoughts of Camilla and their lusty summer slipped back into his mind. He wanted her, and she was raring to go. Camilla was married to a rogue husband, mothering 2 children, and bored.
Some years into Camilla's marriage, I think she realized that she had married a man who was still her dashing cavalry officer, but had a bit of a glad eye.
Andrew Parker Bowles had girls from day one. I mean, it was a funny sort of marriage to start with. I never understood that.
Hey, don't look at me. I don't understand the bloody thing either.
Andrew Parker Bowles wasn't the only one willing to break his vows. Like their great-grandparents before them, Charles and Camilla dove into each other's beds. Good sport that he was, Andrew cheered them on.
I think there's a class of Englishmen who would lay down his wife for his country, and Andrew Parker Bowles was one of those. I think he was perfectly happy for Prince Charles to be the lover of his wife. Perfectly happy. There's nothing particularly extraordinary to him that was going on. Others had done it in previous generations. Why shouldn't he?
Since Camilla's husband wasn't making much of a fuss, they were old friends after all, Charles added another twist to this twisted business. He moved in with them.
He was actually living at Bowley Hyde Manor at the Parker Bowles' house during the week while Andrew was in London doing his duties as an army officer. And Andrew would come home at the weekend, and sometimes Charles would stay on, so they were a threesome.
Kinky.
And sometimes he would go away. But quite often the Parker Bowleses would have a dinner party, and Charles would disappear upstairs and have his supper on his knee in the nursery, while the people downstairs had their dinner, and as soon as everybody had gone, he'd come downstairs again.
When the upstairs-downstairs business got old, Charles bought his own home nearby. But with all he had, there was something missing in his life. A princess, to be exact.
You've got to remember by this time that Charles had exceeded his 30th birthday when he promised he would bring forward a future bride. There was no bride in sight, and there was pressure on Prince Charles from every quarter, from Buckingham Palace, from the Queen, from Prince Philip, from the courtiers, from the press, from the public. They all wanted to see a Princess of Wales.
As custom and practice had it at the time, he couldn't marry a girl with, quotes, a past. And his parents would have preferred him to marry royalty.
Enter Lady Diana Spencer, the beautiful daughter of an earl with all the right connections. She grew up playing with the royal children, and her grandmother was lady-in-waiting to the Queen Mother. Diana first met Charles when she was 16, too young for serious consideration. But 2 years later, hello, princess.
Sarah Spencer went out with Prince Charles for a time, but when that failed, Suddenly, Sarah Spencer and her other sister decided that they would put Diana in the frame, and she was pushed forward as a potential candidate.
Diana started popping up with the prince, and it wasn't long before the tabloids pounced. Not only did the heir have a girlfriend, but the palace was hush-hush. She must be the one.
How well are you coping with all the press attention? Well, as you can see, you can tell. Are you bearing up with it quite well, though? Because it must be quite a strain with all of us after you.
Well, it is, naturally. Will you be back at all?
As things heated up, the press scrambled for stories about the couple. They thought they landed a big one. They caught Charles and a woman boarding a train at night. Could it be the virtuous Diana?
It was important in those days, particularly important, that any bride of the Prince of Wales should be virginal. And it was somehow slightly tacky and sneaky that she, Lady Diana Spencer, this virginal figure, should have crept aboard a train, spent a night of lust, and then sort of disappeared the next day, and that was considered pretty bad news.
The romance was in jeopardy. Did Charles blow it again?
On that very night when Diana was meant to have been on that train, I know that she wasn't at the hours suggested, because on that same night she was attending a birthday party at the Ritz Hotel in London's Piccadilly. I know she was there because I saw her there.
The press got it wrong. The woman wasn't the virginal Diana. It was the very married Camilla. As the world was falling in love with Lady Di, Charles was carrying on an illicit affair. The press missed the boat. Or is that the train?
When Diana came along, naturally enough, he consulted Camilla, and he asked Camilla all sorts of things and told her all sorts of things, which Diana was not privy to. Even when Diana became engaged to Charles, Camilla was still getting the news and the information first.
Always supportive of her prince, Camilla tried to take Diana under her wing and show her the royal ropes. The princess-to-be was not amused.
Diana turned up at Ludlow Races with Camilla, and you can see in the photographs from Ludlow Races the frustration in her face as she was being led by Charles' ex-girlfriend, or so she thought at the time, and resisting very much this older woman, trying very hard to pile on the charm.
Camilla called Diana the mouse. Diana called Camilla the Rottweiler.
Ooh, I love when things get catty.
The thing about Diana was that she really believed that because she was younger and prettier and that she was going to marry Charles, that she would be able to see Camilla off. But the truth was, she never could.
Women are taking Haynes her way.
All New Mission, Tuesday at 9 on A&E.
Hey, welcome back to Meet the Royals here on A&E. Prince Charles's full title, now if you've got the time to hear it, that is Prince Charles Philip Arthur George, Prince of Wales, Earl of Chester, Duke of Cornwall, Duke of Rothesay, Earl of Carrick, Baron of Renfrew, Lord of the Isle, and Prince and Great Steward of Scotland. That is a mouthful. Now, most of these titles go automatically to the heir of the throne, and each carries its own specific meaning. Duke of Rothesay, for example, is a 600-year-old title that says he's the heir apparent to the Scottish throne. Charles is also a Knight of the Garter, a Knight of the Thistle, and Princess Diana once called him Fish Face in public, and that was back when they seemed to like each other.
When 19-year-old Lady Diana glided down the palace steps on the arm of her handsome prince, Camilla was discreetly out of view. Charles had finally got it right, or so it seemed.
I'm amazed that she's been brave enough to take me on. And I suppose in love. Of course. Whatever in love means.
I can't understand a word he said. Let's play it again.
And I suppose in love. Of course. Whatever in love means.
Thank you. Please continue.
The irony about that famous "whatever love means" remark in the engagement interview is that, of course, he knew perfectly well what love meant because he was in love with Camilla. It's been said that Camilla was watching the engagement interview on television, which would have been only natural. The whole nation was watching it. And therefore, Charles felt in some way he would have been betraying Camilla by candidly confessing his love for Diana, so that his feelings about Camilla were already complicating this relationship with Diana before it had even begun.
The difficulty was that he had picked badly with a future wife, and he had no idea how to cope with Diana. And the way that she was treated in the run-up to the royal wedding was nothing short of criminal.
Right after they got engaged, Charles ditched Diana and jetted to Australia for 6 weeks. She moved into dreary Buckingham Palace to master the royal wave with no support from her future husband. It is said that her warmest welcome when she moved in was a lunch invitation from Camilla.
I think Diana was upset by the eternal presence of Camilla. She felt abandoned and betrayed by Prince Charles, and Camilla was never very far away. She could feel her lurking presence.
Diana knew Charles was still in love with Camilla. Days before the wedding, Diana found a bracelet. It was engraved with Charles's pet name for Camilla, Girl Friday. Diana wanted out and turned to her sisters for advice. "It's too late," they said. "Your face is already on the tea towels." With no fairy godmother to help her, Diana put on a brave face, strapped on her tiara, and climbed into a glass carriage. On July 29, 1981, Lady Diana Spencer married the Prince of Wales in the fairy tale wedding of the century. Even on her wedding day, Diana couldn't escape Camilla. The cavalry escort for the bridegroom's coach was led by none other than Andrew Parker Bowles.
You've known Prince Charles for a very long time, haven't you? What sort of person is he?
Well, as well as I do, everyone knows he's a marvellous leader and a marvellous man.
It gets better. Camilla was a guest at the wedding.
But the mouse roared and showed the Rottweiler she could fight back.
Diana was not without power, even in those early days at Buckingham Palace. She managed to make sure that Camilla was not invited to the wedding breakfast. And so that was an early hit for Diana.
Charles swore that his mistress was a thing of the past. But he slipped up on his honeymoon when Diana caught him sporting cufflinks from Camilla.
To wear the cufflinks that Camilla had given him on his honeymoon was questionable. I mean, from his point of view, she was one of his greatest friends. You know, he had finished his relationship with her, chosen Diana. She was past, Diana was future, so where was the harm?
Things started looking up after Prince William's birth in 1982. As they emerged from the hospital, they looked like a perfect young family. However, not all was peachy in paradise. The princess was upstaging the prince, and he didn't like it one bit. When they split up to work the crowd, it was her they wanted to meet, not him.
I've come to the conclusion that really it would have been far easier to have had 2 wives.
Ouch! That's gotta hurt.
To have covered both sides of the street. And I could have walked down the middle, directing the operation.
She was getting all the love and affection that she possibly could from the world's media and from every person that she met in the street. And what she couldn't understand was why she couldn't get the same adulation from her husband.
But as a prince, Charles was used to getting help more than giving it.
From the moment he wakes up to the minute he goes to bed, Prince Charles is right royally pampered. First thing in the morning, his loyal valet will gently knock on his bedroom door and bring in a tray of coffee and cookies. And then he will go into the royal bathroom and squeeze the royal toothpaste onto the royal toothbrush using a special silver toothpaste squeezer. And then he will lay out the royal clothes and then afterwards help him to get dressed. And get this, when Prince Charles goes to church on a Sunday morning, his valet will steam and iron a £5 note, fold it with the Queen's head facing outwards. All that Prince Charles has to do is place it into the church collection. And when Prince Charles had to give a urine sample at a hospital, a loyal servant held the urine bottle for him. A real case of the royal we.
By the time Harry arrived, 2 years after William, Charles and Diana's relationship was heading back to the fridge.
The marriage was not working, and at that point, friends of his saw what was going on and thought that he needed some help, and they knew that he had once had a very close relationship with Camilla. Camilla, by this time, was a very unhappy woman living in Wiltshire. They shared an awful lot in common. They loved hunting, they loved gardening, they loved all sorts of things, and friends brought them together again.
Soon, some of England's most noble families were turning their country estates into love shacks for the prince and his girl Friday.
It's a group of English gentlemen who would be very happy to allow the Prince of Wales and his mistress to use their four-poster bed in their stately home and consider it to be a great feather in their cap. And indeed, probably half a dozen such people stepped forward and offered Charles and Camilla a sort of sanctuary over the years, and they were able to conduct their affair here, there, and everywhere.
Until, that is, Diana decided it was time to out her rival.
Tomorrow, Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
West Bank.
Being the Prince of Wales is nice, but it doesn't pay a dime. Luckily, Charles is also the Duke of Cornwall, which is where the real money is. The duchy owns 5 million acres of commercial and farmland. That brings the prince about $17 million a year. Not too shabby. Now, a big chunk of that goes to charity, and the other big chunk goes to pay 90 staff members who run his household. You know, you just need a little bit of help here and there to get by. And get this, the prince is not required to pay income tax, but he does. Voluntarily. A cool $8 million a year. What a bloke.
By the time Charles and Diana had added 2 sons to the royal lineup, their marriage had started to crack.
I remember I went on one of her holidays to Mallorca when the Waleses were guests of the King and Queen of Spain, and I watched for 5 or 6 hours, and in all that period, they didn't say a single word to one another.
The War of the Windsors exploded when Diana joined forces with author Andrew Morton on a shocking tell-all book.
Diana was like a kettle boiling over. She'd been left on the hob too long. She was boiling hot and ready to sing. And she saw an opportunity to right all the wrongs in her marriage, so she thought, by talking to Andrew Morton. And it was only with the publication of Andrew Morton's book that the world knew for certain that Prince Charles had a mistress, and her name was Camilla Parker Bowles.
The life Camilla led as discreet, unknown mistress came to a screeching halt. Photographers stalked her every move. Charles and Diana's domestic squabble became a matter of state.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that, with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate. Their Royal Highnesses have no plans to divorce, and their constitutional positions are unaffected.
The public blamed Camilla. Spotted at a supermarket, she was pelted with bread rolls. Three months later, the world learned the intimate details of Charles and Camilla's love. Their private phone calls became public gossip.
The Camilla Gate tape showed why Camilla is so important in Charles's life. There she is saying, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm writing a speech about organic farming." She says, "God, I can't wait to read that. Can you fax it to me?" Who wouldn't love a woman who took an interest in your professional life, especially if it was as boring as that?
Embarrassed, Charles decided to give the world his side of the story. He granted a television interview. No heir to the throne had ever agreed to discuss his private life so publicly. But if Di could tell all, so could Charles. His plan backfired.
Everything would have been fine if Prince Charles had never admitted adultery publicly. If he had remained silent, Andrew Parker Bowles and Camilla Parker Bowles would still be married to this day. There would be an alliance between the three which would have meant that none of the public scandal which followed would actually have done so.
Charles's miscalculation ended Camilla's marriage and tarnished his princely image. Then Diana went for the jugular. This time she agreed to an explosive TV interview. More than 20 million people tuned in.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
In 1996, Queen Elizabeth decided enough was enough and ordered Charles and Diana to divorce. With his marriage out of the way, Charles and his official office at St. James's Palace launched a Camilla campaign. First off, she had to be acceptable to the public.
Most of the photographs of Camilla that were published in the press were sort of snatched, you know, kind of paparazzi shots, and she was hiding, or, you know, she was drawn, she was worried, she, you know, probably was feeling sort of psychologically battered on all sides. And you know, you can understand people would see this and think, oh, you know, she just looks like, you know, some sort of horrible old bat.
The bat had to go. Camilla abandoned the scruffy country look and unveiled a new woman. It didn't work.
How can you compare Camilla Parker Bowles with Diana? That's what most people say. How can you compare a middle-aged matron with a goddess?
In July 1997, Charles snubbed Diana by hosting a huge party for Camilla's 50th birthday. But Princess Diana refused to let them steal the limelight.
I remember I was in the south of France at Saint-Tropez with Diana, and she was besporting herself daily in front of the cameras in an array of bikinis and swimsuits, and she made sure for 6 days that she was on page 1 of all the newspapers, and Camilla, if she got in at all, was on about page 15. It was a wonderful game that went on. Diana just cut the ground from under the feet all week and got huge pleasure in doing so. It was a joy to behold.
Hey, Davy Jones here for A&E and the Meet the Royals Throne line, where the scoop on your favorite royals is just a throne call away. We'll take you inside the palace walls to see what it's really like to be a royal. Be sure to watch Meet the Royals every Sunday night at 10, 9 Central on A&E. Let's begin, shall we?
Thanks, but I might take some.
A&E Home Video proudly offers the program you're watching on VHS for only $24.95 plus shipping and handling. To order, call 1-800-423-1212 or visit aetv.com.
Cold Case Files, tomorrow at 9 on A&E.
Charles and Camilla were making progress in their struggle for public acceptance. Then, on August 31st, 1997, Diana was killed in a tragic car accident. Her death shocked the world and paralyzed the monarchy. As Diana's funeral silenced the streets of London, Camilla slid into the shadows.
There'd been a subtle campaign to make Camilla more acceptable to the British public from probably about the mid-1990s, which was severely set back when Diana died, for all sorts of reasons. I mean, Charles and Camilla were both seen as the villains at that point, and it would have been completely tasteless and wrong and impossible to have entertained any thought of bringing Camilla out again.
After Diana's death, Charles publicly distanced himself from Camilla and devoted himself to his boys.
Oh, yes, how nice.
But after a decent interval had passed, the Camilla campaign cranked up again. Stories were leaked announcing that Prince William had tea with Camilla. And Prince Charles made it clear, especially to the Queen, that Camilla was non-negotiable. She was here to stay.
Hold on. Is the prince standing up to his mum?
I think that sent a message to the people, I mean, to the British public, that if Camilla was acceptable to Diana's son and the prince's son, both sons, then she couldn't perhaps have been all that bad.
She's a really strong character, and she's fun, and she makes people want to be around her. You know, when she comes into a room, you know, she laughs. She makes life an easier burden than it is. She's one of those people. And Charles, who's inclined to be full of doom and gloom, she's absolutely perfect for him, and he really does need her around because she just makes his life more fun.
St. James's Palace's officials believe that simply by bringing her into a room at a party, a private party, through one door and Prince Charles through another door, somehow this is going to endear the British public to the idea of them being a couple. The public want to be able to see Camilla Parker Bowles out in the open. They want to see her talking to people, meeting people, interacting with people, just in the way that Diana used to do. They want to get to know Camilla Parker Bowles.
People don't know what Camilla's like because they haven't met her, but they have heard very positive things about her. In time, people will either get to like her or won't, but they're never going to know a great deal about her.
Camilla was doing her part. She tried her best to smile for the cameras.
It's me. Oh, no, hold on, you're out of focus. Oh, whoops. And a nice big smile.
Be out of focus.
No, this way.
Right. Getting very close.
And a nice big smile. Hey, look at that. Excellent. Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Feeling more comfortable with the press, the couple agreed to the most coveted photo op in years. In January 1999, almost 30 years after they met by a tree, Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles went on their first public date.
It's the picture royal watchers have waited for. Charles and Camilla in public as a couple for the first time. They were met by an explosion of flash guns as they left the Ritz Hotel in London moments before midnight.
The press and public were warming to Camilla, but the Queen wasn't so sure. Her Majesty is the head of the Church of England, after all, and must set the royal example. Adultery cannot be encouraged.
The Queen is a deeply religious, moral person, and she views Camilla as an adulteress who had an affair when she was married to one of her Guards officers. Andrew Parker Bowles was having an affair with her son.
Charles is just a heartbeat away from becoming king. If he hasn't regularized his position with Camilla before his mother dies, all sorts of constitutional vagaries will occur. He may never be able to marry her. She could die at any moment. Charles is seized with terror every time he sees his mother riding on a horse without a helmet. But if he manages to marry her before the Queen dies, then everything should be fine.
Will the Queen ever abdicate and let her son, Prince Charles, take over the throne? It's a question that fascinates royalty watchers, and one that Prince Charles would love to know the answer to. He's now in his 50s, and he'd love to feel the crown on his head before he gets too old. But it seems that his mum just won't let him. I remember Diana telling me that one year he was furious after a Queen's Christmas broadcast where she said that she was going to soldier on to the bitter end. It means that if the Queen lives as long as the Queen Mother, Prince Charles will be in his late 70s before he becomes king. And as for Prince William, don't expect him to become king until he's a pensioner.
In 2000, the Queen reluctantly met Camilla.
I think she just felt that this game of cat and mouse with Charles and Camilla hiding away could not go on forever. And I think it was very much to do with the Queen Mother and her feelings about the monarchy. And I think once the Queen Mother died, the Camilla was able to come more into the public eye, and the Queen felt easier with it.
3 cheers for Her Majesty
The Queen personally invited Camilla to the Golden Jubilee.
Hip hip! Hip hip!
Later that week, Camilla was part of an intimate family dinner at Charles's new home in London, Clarence House. Finally, things are falling into place for the prince and his lady. Blissfully happy after years of marriages, divorces, and affairs, Charles and Camilla are living a very modern royal romance.
Obviously, Prince Charles and Camilla are in love. And I think good luck to them. I think it's fantastic at that time of life to be in love with somebody and to be so happy. I think it's the most brilliant thing in the world.
Somehow she has the magic touch with him that she understands him inside out.
Whether or not he will eventually marry her, I don't know. They're very happy the way they are. Prince Charles has just moved into Clarence House, which was his grandmother's house, and Camilla has moved in there with him for the time that she's in London. And the boys have a room there, so it's sort of happy families, but without the marriage.
Marriage, queenhood, anything can happen. This is Davy Jones telling you that if it does, you'll see it on Meet the Royals. Hey, Meet the Royals! I think the host is fantastic.
Tomorrow on A&E. At 8, Barbara Stanwyck on biography. And at 9, a trail of debt and a trace of lipstick link a con man to murder on Cold Case Files. Then at 10, a community loses faith when their rabbi does the unthinkable. Cherry Hill, New Jersey on City Confidential. It all begins tomorrow at 8 on A&E.